Hey YouTubers, this is my third Honda Ridgeline. I just got a 2025 Black Edition and I absolutely love it. I had a 2018, which was a second generation RTLE, and I had a 2012 RTLE with navigation. And really love these trucks, and this is my third BakFlip cover. Now the last two vehicles, this one and the previous one, had the MX4 covers, and I really like them a lot. And BakFlip has an excellent video on how to install the MX4 on a Honda Ridgeline. So this is not going to be a duplicate of that. I want to point out a few things that I've learned from installing several of these that I think are improvements on how BakFlip installs them. So consider this a supplementary video. Go ahead and order your BakFlip cover, and go ahead and order yourself a T50 Torx bit that fits a 3/8 inch socket. I'll try to remember to put a link to it down below. That's the only specialty tool you're going to really need. If you have a 3/8 inch socket wrench, you're set. You need a 13mm socket, a short extension, a number 2 Phillips screwdriver, and that's really all you have to have for the basics. If you happen to have a 3/16 inch T-handle Allen wrench, that's going to be a lot nicer to use than the little disposable wrench they put in with the kit. So I'm going to jump in with some little video pointers as I go along, and I see them doing things in a particular way in the instructions that come with the BakFlip, and I think there's a better way. So first thing we're going to do is open this box and inspect it and make sure all the parts are there. Okay, these are the parts that were missing in the first BakFlip I ordered. So I'm glad to see everything's here. Yeah, this one's complete. Okay, so here's the front of the truck bed right here. And here's the rail that we're going to be installing. And you can see there's a foam pad here on the end of that rail. But I don't have a lot of confidence in that pad as far as keeping water from getting in here, and it doesn't do much of anything at all to keep water from coming down this little groove here. So we're going to fill those in with that butyl rubber. Now I'm going to try to get you a good view of this, but I may get in the way of the camera here a little bit. So just get you a good sized chunk and just knead it up till it's good and soft. And we're going to tackle this gap right here. Now, like I say, from here forward, the water just goes down behind the bed and drains out underneath the truck. So we're not worried about that. We just don't want water to come in right here at this edge. So I'm not trying to fill this whole gap, just this back part right here. And just kind of push it up into that gap. And now this little body panel tool here, it comes in real handy. If I kind of smoothen that out. Here we go, just kind of get that excess out of there. Push this down a little bit. Just going to mash that out like that. Any excess here, just kind of run my fingernail through it and pull it up. All right. Let's see if I can do this here. Just score a little line there. Get that extra bit out of there. All right, that's not super pretty, but that's going to be covered up by the tonneau cover anyway. Now I'm going to get me a little piece here, and we're going to try to fill this gap over to about here or so. There we go. And just going to kind of mash that up into that corner there. That's good. All right. That all looks really good. Now, I'm sure I've got a little bit excess here. I'll trim that off after I get the tonneau cover installed. There's one more little gap right here. I want to run a little bead right there to seal that off. right up in there. And tuck that right in there, and that should do a pretty darn good job keeping the water out. I see one little dimple right there. I want to try to fill in a little bit. There we go. All right, let's get those rails installed. Okay, now you've got your own set of instructions, so I'm not going to duplicate everything that's in the instructions, but I am going to point out a few little things that might be a little unclear in the instructions. It took me a minute or two to figure out how these things go together. If you look right here, that little groove right there by my thumbnail goes into this slot here. So, and you need to keep everything loose till you get it in the truck and ready to tighten it up. That goes in there like that. And so here's what both of the rails look like with the brackets attached. So I'm going to go ahead and get those bolted in, and I'll get back to you. Okay, if your clamps for attaching rail B to rail A look like this, and if your rail B does not have a silver tab up here, then you have the newer style MX4 they just recently introduced. The newer style uses these blocks to attach the tonneau cover to the rail, and so when you remove the tonneau cover, you don't have this big metal tab sticking out. It's definitely an upgrade not to have those tabs getting in your way, but installing these clamps can be a bit of a pain in the butt. I found it easier just to go ahead and disassemble them. This part with the slotted hole fits up into this groove right here. And need to install the one up by the bulkhead about 6 to 8 inches out. There happens to be a little screw right here. I think that's a good place for it. And this doesn't just drop in there. You've got to push this down in that slot and really wiggle on it to get it to go in there. And some of them are fit easier than others. All right, there, that one's in there. And you can slide it around a little bit once you get it in there. The next one goes in the middle, about here. I put it about the middle of this prop rod. There we go. That one wasn't too bad. And the last one goes as close to the tailgate as possible. I know this is upside down. I'm just trying to find my spot. All right, there's that little block right there. This one needs to go about here. So I'm going to err on moving it a little further inboard than necessary. And like I say, these things are really tough fit in here. There it goes. Just sort of put them in like that and rock them this way. Now, the rest of it's pretty straightforward, but if you don't get those seated in there all the way, when you tighten them up, they're going to cause this to roll inward. And so if you're having that problem, just start over, take them apart, and insert that part into the rail first, and then we'll reassemble the clamps. Also, there's 2 grooves here that this part can sit in. It can sit on the top groove or the bottom groove. On mine, I found that the bottom groove fits best. Okay, now that I've got the rails installed, here's what that butyl rubber looks like. I've trimmed off the excess, and you can see that that fills in some gaps that the foam block did not take care of. Okay, so I'm making up the drain tubes, And like I said, I've got some 5/16 inch outside diameter ice maker water supply tube. A little chunk of fuel line. I'm sorry, I don't know the size on that. A little bit of car washing soap. And a whole lot of trying to force it in there. So this is a really, really, really tight fit. And you just have to keep pushing and turning and working it. And I even found I had some success doing it this way with a screwdriver. And just work my way around. It takes several minutes. I'll spare you from watching all of that. But when you're done, what you end up with is something like this. So let me finish this one and then I'll install one and show you what that looks like. Okay, there's several holes here along the front of the bed, but we're going to use this one right here in the corner. Just stick the tube down in there. And let's see how much length we need on that. We're going to cut that about, right about there. And push this into place. There we go. And just kind of fold that back behind that tie down. Any water that gathers in this rail is going to come down that tube and go right outside instead of dripping down here in the bed and then having to find the nearest drain hole. So just going to repeat the process on the other side. Here's another backflip tip. Once you get your cover completely adjusted where you're happy with it and you've got a good overlap on the tailgate, tighten down these clamps and slide this clamp in and tighten it up here. Now when you remove your backflip cover and you go to reinstall it, all you have to do is push this part up tight against here and you know you've got it properly aligned. And be sure to do that on both sides.